Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die. I will ride with this group. Seriously, man. Please. And away we go.
Yes, it's back. Purple Daily NFL takes. Took a little hiatus there in like June. I think during the Timberwolves run, we needed some more runway for like daily Flagrant Howls episodes on our schedule. But now that we are there's some rookies that I think are reporting later this week in the NFL. And then Vikings are in like less than 2 weeks.
Vikings quarterbacks report 2 weeks from yesterday.
Okay. It's coming down the pipeline.
So it's basically here.
Training camp is here. Summer is over. Fall is. You thought summer started on Saturday and it's gone now. Training camp.
Summer ends July 5th. The 4th is the marker. Once the 4th's done, it's football season.
Now it's football season, and we're going to bring you a small handful of NFL takes here. And this is going to be weekly all throughout going into the season too. It's just a little place we like to carve out. It's mostly a Purple Daily, obviously a Vikings podcast, but these NFL takes episodes allow us to branch out beyond the Vikings. And it's presented today by Grandpa's Barbecue. Let's put some dry rub seasoning on these NFL takes here, Dex.
Yeah, over the holiday weekend, had some ribs, had some chicken wings, had plenty of things on the grill from our friends from Grandpa's Barbecue with those dry rubs and the sauces. Plenty of awesome options. You go to grandpasbbq.com and you can support also a great cause with xeroderma pigmentosum. Plus, locally, you can get Grandpa's Barbecue at Fratelloni Hardware and Garden Stores. It is in all 20 Fratelloni locations. So you can get that locally here. You can support it online by going to grandpasbarbecueshop.com.
All right, boys. We'll go around the room here. We'll sling some NFL takes. Starting with this one here. I think there are 5 NFL head coaches who should be on a warm to hot seat to start the season. And I'll preface this by saying, generally, I feel like NFL teams and organizations are way too impatient and unreasonable when it comes to, there's some organizations that's like, if you don't win right away with a rookie quarterback in your first year, you're fired or on a hot seat. So I do think teams take a deep breath once in a while. It does take a few years to build a culture sometimes, but we want it right now. We want that quarterback to be great in the first 5 starts, and you need to be a winning team. So despite that preface, here are 5 coaches that I think should be on a hot seat.
All right.
You guys tell me if you agree or disagree, okay?
Okay.
I've hesitated to put this guy on the list before because I do think he is a better offensive coach than maybe people give him credit for. But just based on the last 2 years, Brian Daboll is number 5 here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
100%
he's firmly in this mix. Yep.
Joe Judge, too. The GM and coach here, both could be out.
On one hand, you've got a guy that elevated Daniel Jones to like a playoff caliber team, a big $100+ million contract, whatever it is. But that was the first year. Okay. Well, incorrectly, they decided to bring Daniel Jones back. It kind of screws up their quarterback future. And then they brought in like Tyrod Taylor, Drew Lock, played some snaps, Tommy DeVito, and now you're into the Jackson Dart, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston business here. In the last 2 years, they've been 31st and 30th in scoring offense, the Giants. Just embarrassing to watch. Fans are wearing brown paper bags over their heads at Giants games. So Brian Daboll, all right, you got between Jackson Dart, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, find a solution, get back on track, be competitive, and the NFC is fairly wide open in a lot of ways. I mean, that division's pretty tough, but Brian Daboll, it's time to show that you're not 31st in offense. Let's go, guy.
Well, and he could be a collateral damage for GM Joe Judge, right? Because if Judge gets fired, then Daboll will be fired by the new GM almost certainly. Like, you let Saquon Barkley on HBO walk out the door.
Is it Joe Shane you're thinking of?
Oh, Joe Shane. I'm sorry.
Joe Judge was like.
Who's Joe Judge?
Joe Judge was the coach for. He's with Ole Miss right now, but he was like a Patriots coordinator,
guy,
wasn't
right?
he?
back in the day.
I don't know why I thought of that then. Joe Shane. So Joe Shane So Joe Shane gets fired.
He was the Giants head coach in 2020-21 too.
Oh, that's
Joe
right.
Joe
That's
Judge.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but if Joe Shane gets fired, Daboll's his guy. He's almost certainly gone as well. And the thing too is, and this is where O'Connell deserves credit, being a really good head coach who works with quarterbacks is great, but you also have to keep the entire team together. And like, it feels like the Giants were fracturing a lot, and that comes back on the coach as well. Like O'Connell, for as much as we praise him for his work with QBs, he's also done a really good job of managing the personalities, right? Brian Daboll seems to me, he might very well be a really good OC.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
It might be a little, but also like, even if there's maybe some personality things in there. I think if you just look at the resume and say, all right, there's a lot of teams that lack some talent here and there on offense or have a quarterback problem. The Vikings post Kirk Cousins for a half season, right? And they still put up yardage. Not every game. They had that one game where it was 3-0 against the Raiders. But I just think to be 31st and 30th in scoring offense is a huge red flag for whatever you're trying to do as an offensive-minded coach, right? So, okay, number 4, as we count down here, on the hot seat, not based on merit and not because I think he should be fired, but I'm putting Kevin Stefanski on here as an agenda-driven, I want him to be fired from Cleveland because I want to see what he looks like somewhere more competent or like with an actual quarterback that isn't a weirdo like Deshaun Watson or a journeyman like a Kenny Pickett or Joe Flacco.
Yes.
So he is, make no mistake, he's the best coach in new Cleveland Browns history since like 1999. I just don't want him to be stuck there any longer. So I'm hoping that Kevin Stefanski finds a different head coaching job.
I hope that you are actually going to, in the remaining 3 names, give us a guy who you feel will be blown out if Stefanski gets blown out. I think Stefanski would get a job in 20 minutes.
Well, that's a good segue because number 3 on my list is a guy that I think is very, very much likely to get fired if this team doesn't make a run or start well. And I think Stefanski would be a great replacement for him, but it's in the same division. It's in the same region. Hell, Zach Taylor is number 3 on this list. Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay.
The last 3 years, the Bengals have started the season 0-2, 0-2, and 0-3. So it's been 4 years since they've won a game in the first 2 games of the season. And you got Joe Burrow, a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I like, there's a defense here of Zach Taylor that would be like, the organization is a disaster. It's cheap. They constantly finish very low in the NFL Players Association surveys every year. It kind of feels early 2000s Vikings-like with just like rickety ownership and facilities and things. So that's baked into the equation a little bit here. But Joe Burrow is a once in a franchise, once in a generation, maybe once in 2 generations level quarterback, just like per franchise. And you are wasting it right now. Now, they did go to a Super Bowl a few years ago, but the slow starts, like losing to the Patriots in week 1 last year, is just kind of, I don't know. It's to this point, Zach Taylor's been an uninspiring head coach, and Joe Burrow at some point deserves a ride or die competent head coach to push forward throughout the prime of his career.
As great as Joe Burrow is, if I was Stefanski working for the Brown family after Jimmy Haslam with the Cleveland Browns, I don't think I would touch it. Like, that team is such a mess. They're trying to what? They're trying to lowball their first round draft pick on some his contract, and so he held out. It's
not as much. It's like so Cyril's explained this on O-line committee, and that like other teams are taking this step where it's about essentially if something happens to you, either like you get too many suspensions or something happens off the field or whatever, that they could take guaranteed money away from you. And other owners are pushing for it too. But of course, it's the Bengals that are like, I was going to say,
but the Bengals should not be the poster child for this.
Yeah.
Just sign the guy. Yeah. Anyway.
So, yeah, Zach Taylor, number 3. Like, start 1-0. Who do they play in week 1? Let's look up the Bengals schedule here.
They're back to a Super Bowl. I mean, you've got.
Well, you got to start somewhere, though.
But like, your defense does stink, so.
Don't start 0-3 or 1-4. Here it is. Ironically, they play at Cleveland in week 1, and then they play home against Jacksonville in week 2.
There we go.
And then it's at Vikings, at Denver, Detroit, Green Bay, Pittsburgh. In fact, if they start 0-2 this year, good luck. At Vikings, at Broncos, Detroit, Green Bay on the road, Pittsburgh. So,
okay.
Zach Taylor, number 3. Okay, number 2. I hate to do this because he's been one of the best head coaches in the league the last 6 or 7 years. But similar to Zach Taylor, you're sitting on an all-time great quarterback, and you need to be performing at a higher level. Now, the Buffalo Bills, the team I'm talking about here, Sean McDermott is number 2. They've at least been winning 10, 11, 12, 13 games in the regular season, right? They've been, like, regular season, the Bills have been great.
Yes.
But at least Zach Taylor went to a Super Bowl with Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Josh Allen, here's the crazy thing. 7 years of Sean McDermott and Josh Allen. One of the great 7-year regular season stretches ever, like in terms of wins and losses. But only 2 trips in 7 years beyond the second round of the playoffs. And 0 trips to the Super Bowl. So, again, a ton of regular season success, but in part because the AFC East has been it's like the post-Brady AFC East for the most part, where you get a down New England team, a worse than a down Jets team, and then a Miami team that can't win a game outside of like 75-degree weather after the 1st of November. So I just think at some point, if the Bills keep running into the same second round or third round loss and they can't get to a Super Bowl, you got to start thinking about what is the second phase of Josh Allen's career here.
What coach gets, so if the Bills go out again in the playoffs and they do make a change, who do you go for? Because that's like big fit. That's like, big game hunting. Like you're going after, because that's a next step. So like, who do you go for? Who's like the Bill Parcells when, Dallas went, right, and got Parcells because he had been to Super Bowls. Who is that now, do you think?
So like someone who's currently employed?
Well, I'm just thinking like...
I'll give you one.
Yep.
I don't know if Josh Allen plays within structure enough, but if San Francisco misses the playoffs again, and he's not on my list, but could Kyle Shanahan, could it be like an Andy Reid situation where, hey, it's been a nice little run here, but yeah, you go get a Kyle Shanahan. Now, how well would Josh Allen play within the Kyle Shanahan parameters?
Yeah.
Maybe he's just more of a souped-up more athletic version of Brock Purdy in some ways, and it'd be great. But yeah, it'd have to be a guy like that where, like, Andy Reid was awesome, but then Philadelphia, it just kind of got stale, and it was right. They were ready to move on. Who's that guy? I think it's Shanahan right now is kind of the more modern-day Andy Reid.
Interesting.
And is that number 1?
No,
that's 2.
Because I have a take, but I wanted to wait till number 1 was.
Dex paying full attention to my list.
We're not even to what.
But
yeah,
now
Dex
is already faded as I get to number.
Drum roll,
number 1.
please.
Okay, number 1 on my list.
That's why they're bad.
Mike Tomlin.
Is
number 1 on my list.
Snap.
He's 12th all time in wins, so he's like first ballot Pro Football Hall of Fame. And the Steelers have only had 3 head coaches since the 60s. By the way, if Mike Tomlin does get to 10 wins this year, he would tie Chuck Noll for like the all-time win list, and he would move into the top 10 among NFL head coaches, entering year 19 in Pittsburgh. But doesn't it feel a little stale and a little desperate?
But they haven't fired a coach. Like Chuck Noll was hired in 1969. It's the Rooney still. They've gone Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin.
I know, but it's been 19 years. The last time time Mike Tomlin won a playoff game was in 2016.
That's crazy.
And on top of that, this is a very offensive league. There's a lot of innovation happening. And the last 6 years, the Steelers' best offensive rank in terms of yardage offense, best is 23rd. So they've been a bottom 10 to bottom 5 offense for 6 years. And their answer to that is, all right, we're going to fix the offense here by gambling on a 41-year-old known culture destroyer and narcissist, Aaron Rodgers, to save the offense. So I'm with you. They don't fire coaches. They're very stable. but it does feel a little stale, and the offense has been garbage. You can't just be a defensive coach. Like, you're a football coach, and their offense has been really, really bad. So
I feel like the Steelers would fire the GM before Tomlin, but that's just a total hypothetical. But I like it because it does seem like if they don't make the playoffs, which, by the way, with Aaron at quarterback, they might not. I like where your head is at because I do think that there would be a lot of questions asked. I also think that if Mike Tomlin got fired by the Steelers, much like Stefanski, the next day he gets a job.
Yeah.
Because he's so respected.
If you wanted one,
yeah.
Maybe there's not one out there. I mean, maybe
I'll give you one.
Buffalo Bills job.
I think this is a long shot. I don't think that this is a given. But if they really stumble and just don't reach expectations from their preseason win total and just from what happened last year, Matt LaFleur.
Ooh.
Like, let's say the Packers are, and when I mean stumble, like they have a 5 or 6 win season and they're bad. They didn't win a big game at all last year. That's it. Similar to Pittsburgh. They don't like, going into the coaching carousel. They kept McCarthy for a very long time. I look at that one and maybe even put it in the same bin that Phil was talking about with Shanahan, where do other teams say, you know what? We'll give you a couple first-round picks, or we'll give you some draft capital for someone like Matt LaFleur.
Boy, I mean, I don't think he's anywhere. I think if you were to make a list of 1 through 32, like who is on a hot seat, I think he's like among the coolest seats in the NFL right now.
But if they did win 4 games or something, I just don't see that.
But what planet do they win 4 games?
No, I know. I'm just saying.
If they do, okay, then it's
that would be the only thing that if they completely busted. But I don't think. I mean, they don't have, for the most part, aside from a couple of seasons in the last 30 years, they don't have a habit of ever truly busting.
No. They were, by the way, last year the Packers were top 5 yardage offense, top 5 yardage defense, and the issue, Declan mentioned it, was they couldn't. There was like the top 5 teams on their schedule. The Eagles, the Vikings, they had a hard time beating the best teams. So I think the Packers are closer to like winning 2 playoff games than they are to finishing 5-12 and firing a head coach.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, if the wheels come off, then okay.
I got one that you missed. Watch out in Florida. Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
Mike McDaniel.
Yep.
If Tua busts again, and by the way, I'm not even talking he stinks. I'm just saying another concussion. He can't play. That is a really volatile owner. I could see him pulling the plug.
So the key word in this exercise was who should be on a hot seat. And I don't think that Mike McDaniel should be on a hot seat for Tua's concussion problems. Unless you want to say they're actively overriding some sort of medical protocol. Because when Tua played, he took that job raving about Tua's accuracy and his offensive system. Mm-hmm. And when Tua plays, Mike McDaniel is 25-16. And they've gone to the playoffs. It's when he's out because of the concussions that offense kind of goes belly up. So it's a name that probably is on a hot seat. I don't think it's as fair. I'd be curious to see if they had a reliably healthy quarterback, what would that look like in Miami going forward? I
don't think, though, to go back to your list too, I don't think that Stefanski should be. I just think that Cleveland is so poorly run. Like, I lump McDaniel in with Cleveland, sort of to a certain degree, although I'm more inclined to agree that he might get fired, with Zach Taylor. Like, the Bengals, the Browns, and the Dolphins are all owned by really unstable groups.
Agreed. Yeah. And Stefanski I put on because I want him to get fired so that he can go somewhere else.
Well, and he should go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I do think I think him and Tomlin would have jobs very quickly again. And I think Stefanski, to your point, could be outstanding with a quarterback and a situation that's not completely screwed up.
So there it is. Those are the coaches that should or maybe are on a hot seat in 2025.
I love firing people in July.
So much fun.
I'll go next year because it's another coaching type of take and statement. And my statement is I love Pete Carroll. So there was a big feature on ESPN.com this morning from Ryan McFadden kind of talking about Pete Carroll and the energy and just there's a little bit of of optimism there finally for the first time in a long time. Pete Carroll is 73 years old, I believe. Yeah, 73 years old, and he is legitimately wrestling. I said that right. Wrestling offensive linemen and other players. He gave one of his players a people's elbow. He gave the Rock's people's elbow. He is running up and down the field with a bunch of defensive backs. I repeat, this man is 73 years old, and he's just this ball of energy and life still. And look, that's a very stacked division, the AFC West. The Chiefs are still going to be really good. Chargers good. Broncos made the playoffs last year. But it does feel like, for the first time, I do understand where maybe the Raiders are like, oh, there's actually we have a competent head coach who has had success with multiple organizations over the last 12 years. We might not be a juggernaut. We might not be a Super Bowl favorite, but there is reason for optimism. Good for the Raiders and good for Pete Carroll. I'm excited for him.
The people criticizing the Pete Carroll hire, to me, I think Judd might have been one of them. So you can fight on this if you want to. But the people that criticize that hire are, to me, like out of touch with where the Raiders have been at as a franchise the last 20 years. The Raiders have been to the playoffs twice since they lost the Super Bowl in 2002. Twice. In a league that literally a league that rewards teams that are bad with great shots at quarterbacks and high draft picks. Everyone's got the same cap space. The Raiders have had a multitude of 3 and 4 win seasons over the last 15 or 20 years. And Pete Carroll is in the above 500 business, the culture building business. So is Pete Carroll going to be the one that launches a dynasty with the Raiders? No, but the Raiders are trying to learn how to ride a bike. And Pete Carroll can help you take the training wheels off of your football bike and have some fun doing it. Chew some gum. The Raiders were 4-13 last year. Pete Carroll, in 17 years, New England and Seattle as an NFL head coach, has had 3 losing seasons only, and those were 7-win seasons. So Pete Carroll's worst season in almost 2 decades of NFL head coaching would be double the amount of wins that the Raiders had last year. So all in on Pete Carroll.
To defend myself, I think I expressed pessimism about the Raiders because of this. They, again, are owned by a maniac. If Mark Davis gets out of the way, here's the thing about Pete Carroll with the Seahawks.
Here's a guy.
He got the job, and ownership cleared out. They're like, you do what you want. You're in charge. Culture is yours. If the Raiders do that, they'll be fine. But Mark Davis can't help, and I'm sure that Brady will try, but Mark Davis meddles, and he drags people down. And at the end of the day, if you are owned by a guy who at the very top of the food chain doesn't know jack squat about culture, that drags teams down. So that was my thing. Let's see here, because I'll give it a chance. But, the Wilfs here do a pretty good job. Now, unfortunately, with Zim and Spielman, they didn't pay attention enough at the end at all, and so those two weren't talking. The culture stunk. But with what we've seen with Kwesi and KO, they've done a great job of just allowing the culture to build itself, and those guys are in charge. If Pete Carroll is in charge, I think you've got a chance. I don't trust Mark Davis because he's never, ever not stepped in it.
But Pete Carroll doesn't need this. And by the way, he turned 74 in week 1, so he's halfway to 80.
Wants this, though. I think he liked the idea, and I'm sure he was sold. I'm sure he was sold on, hey, this is going to be yours. Let's just wait and see.
My point is, the minute that it becomes something that he wasn't sold on, okay, cool, I'm 74. Peace out. I don't need this anymore. I think part of the logic, and maybe this is where Brady came in, I don't know, but part of the logic here is if we hire a 38-year-old or a 42-year-old, they're probably going to just are they going to be able to manage up with a weird owner? Probably not. If it's a coordinator coming off of, it's their first head coaching job. Mm-hmm. Pete Carroll has had 30 years of experience in football, at a head level, and managing up with billionaire owners. So it is one of the sneakiest great hires of this cycle here. Yeah, it's a tough division, but they have a chance to maybe get to 8 or 9 wins.
Unfortunately, if he's not allowed to do what he wants and he walks, it's a failure for the team. So we'll see. But the Seahawks did a great job. They turned him loose, and he did a fantastic job, which I at that point didn't know. All right, here's mine. I absolutely love Little July, former player on former player on former player crime, and here's what we got. So, Cris Carter, the former Vikings Hall of Fame receiver, called out Chad Johnson, the former Bengal, who thought that he was going to Canton, but is not, because Chad Johnson, Ocho Cinco, challenged Travis Hunter to go one-on-one. Sounds like good fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Carter basically said, Chad Johnson, come on, man, you're not that great. You weren't that great. Pretty much puts him down. On another podcast, former All-Pro corner Asante Samuel, not the kid, not Junior, who is still unsigned, but his dad, who was a very good corner in his prime, defended Ocho Cinco and called Carter, quote, nothing more than a possession receiver and one of the most overrated receivers of all time. I love podcasts, and I love a slow July when something like this with three former players now, and I guarantee you on the next podcast Cris Carter goes on, he will address Asante Samuel. Fantastic stuff.
There's a lot to unpack here because the question is Cris Carter an overrated possession receiver, right?
Yes. And that's really off the top rope to me. Like, to say that was a really strong rebuttal.
I think it is fair to say that he was mostly a possession receiver, and that as an athlete, he wasn't like Randy Moss, throw his hand up and outrun a defensive back. Like size and speed and athletic ability, he wasn't elite. Joey Galloway in his era was like more of that guy. As a route runner, hands and footwork, one of the greatest of all time. And if you also look at the quarterbacks that Cris Carter had to work with throughout the 90s, we think fondly of some of them because like they put up great numbers and whatever, but they put up great numbers in part because they had one of the most reliable, great, call him possession and red zone receivers in the history of the NFL. One of the hardest things in football is when things get tight and it's the 7-yard line, it's the 18-yard line, you're in the deep red, whatever, is to get open in tight quarters and score touchdowns. And Cris Carter was one of the greatest of all time inside the 20, his touchdowns weren't coming from 60 yards out. They were coming from the 11-yard line. And it was coming with chronically concussed Jim McMahon in 1993, a slew of random guys in like 1991 and 92. He helped extend 40-year-old Warren Moon's career into the mid-90s.
Yep.
He brought Randall Cunningham back. I know we give full credit to Moss, right? But, dude, Cris Carter was also a huge part of that 1998 offense and Randall Cunningham coming out of retirement. Right. He helped elevate a young Dante Culpepper to the NFC Championship game, Jeff George. So it is fair to say he was a possession receiver, like the greatest one of all time.
Right. But I mean, he was, and personally, I don't like him that much as a person, but as a player, fantastic. I believe he was one of the original toe tappers. So like he was one of the guys who would go up on the sideline and come down inbounds. As a possession receiver, he had no fear of going over the middle and catching balls, which, by the way, is a thankless job. So, yes, possession receiver, yes. Overrated? I don't think so.
Yeah, he literally scored 130 touchdowns in his career. Chad Johnson had 67. So, I don't know if
Chad Johnson was a big play guy, which was fine. Yeah. But, like, if I could take one in their prime, it's not that hard. I'm taking Cris Carter.
Correct. 100%. So anyway, Asante Samuel, you stay in your retirement home. Stay in your lane.
Just torched him.
Tell your son to sign with the Vikings for some depth. All right, those are NFL takes here. Purple Daily NFL takes. We've got plenty more on the main Purple Daily show throughout this week, and we are 2 weeks away from Vikings training camp and NFL training camps at large. See you guys.